Astu, welcome everyone to the 11th session. And today we are covering Vedānga Shikshā. Today was a good time to have Shiksha because Shravana Masa has started. And traditionally, Shravana Masa is the time when you start studies anyway, and Shiksha Prapti begins. So let's start with the Mangala Charanam, and there's a reason why I have chosen this. Om शं नो मित्र शं वरुणः शं नो भवत्वर्यमा शं न इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः शं नो विष्णुरुक्रमः नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वामेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति Shanti. So recently, I think a politician, journalist made some statement that Gayatri mantra was played in an IIT institution. Actually, it was this one, and this is from not this is obviously not the Gayatri mantra. This is from Shikshavali, and the Shikshavali is quite relevant for today's topic. So today we are covering multiple things. We'll start a little bit about Shikshavali, which is part of Yajurveda. It's there in the Taittiriya Upanishad. Okay. We will also cover, since we are talking about Yajurveda, Yajnavalkya Shiksha, which is part of the Yajurveda. Then we will briefly cover Samaveda and Naradiya Shiksha, which is associated with it. And then finally, we'll cover Pāniniya Shiksha. So yes, this is the overview of what we are doing. So in Vedanga, we finished Jyotisham, Chandas. We are doing Shiksha now. We will cover Niruktam, Vyakaranam, Kalpa in the future. So yes, Manusmriti says, Shrutistu Vedo Vigneya. Know that Vedas are Shruti. And as you might recall, Vedas were orally transmitted. They were written down much later. So all the wisdom library or archive org that documents you get, that's from a much later period, right? So sorry. So what we have is it consisted of Samhita, Brahmanam, and an Aranyakam. The Aranyakam is more like a appendix. So you, in a way, you can also see it as like the various stages of your life. So you have the Brahmanam, which covers certain aspects, and then the Aranyakam, which is maybe after you take Vanaprastha, there are certain additional learnings that you get, right? And the Upanishads or the Vedanta are the final section. Okay. So in the Brahmanams, and again in English it's easy to get confused. This is Brahmanam. A person who is from the Varna is a Brahmana, right? Not Brahmanam. And the reason they are called Brahmana is because they know the Brahma Tattva, right? So that's the reason. That's why related terms, but this is a text, the contents of the Vedas. Actually, I'm saying text, but it was oral, so it's not actually text. Anyway, so in the Brahmanams, it is mentioned that a lot of harm is done to the meaning of the Shrutis if it is not pronounced, Uchcharana, if it's not done correctly. And as you might be aware, in the Vedic period, Sanskritam was tonal, just like Mandarin today is an example of a tonal language. Ma, right? Both are different terms. So both are different words. Likewise, you have in Vedic Sanskritam, you had Udata, Anudata, Swarita. So it was very important that you are orally transmitting correctly, because otherwise within a few generations, the meaning itself will shift. And obviously, we have ensured that the integrity of the Vedas was maintained in a very pristine manner, and that was possible through such rules and the Shiksha knowledge that is being passed down, that we will just briefly cover today. So Vedangas are covered in a sutra style, and again, sutra style is short. We looked at the Lakshana of sutra in the past. It is meant to cover a lot of information in a way which can be orally transmitted uh, easily, or can be written down in a very brief manner. So one thing we should know is that there is something called Pratishakya. Okay, these are the manuals for the precise pronunciation of words, and there is one associated with each samhita, which means just as there are multiple shakhas and multiple Vedas, you can assume that there are multiple Pratishakyas, some many within the same Shakha, within the same Veda. So four such examples are: one is the Taittiriya Pratishakya, then you have the Rik, okay, then you have the Vajasaneyi, which is associated with Yajurveda, and then you have the Atharvana Pratishakya, okay. Now, not it's not just within the Pratishakyas, you can also find concepts related to Shiksha outside of it as well. So, for example, the manner of Pranava or the chanting of Om is described in the Gopatha Brahmana of the Atharvana Veda. So, it's in the Brahmana, it's not specifically in the Pratishakya. Taittiriya Upanishad in its first chapter describes all the components of Shiksha called, that's a spelling mistake, called Shikshadhyaya. Taittiriya Pratishakya is also important for including the Pāniniya Shiksha, but we will cover Pāniniya Shiksha last. I think a little too much emphasis given on Pānini. Of course, he was groundbreaking, but there were people before him as well. So we will cover a little bit of that first. And on the right, what you see is uh, why we started with the Mangalacharan for today. It is from none other than the Shikshavali section. It's how it starts. Okay, Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari I Om, and then what we just said. And if you see the bottom, Iti Prathamo Anuvaka. So after this is the first Anuvaka, and what is this? What is after that? Shiksham Vyakhasyam. I'm not doing the ucharana, okay, the various udata anudata. I'm just reading it. Varnaswaraha matra balam sama santanaha. Okay, iti, this is nothing but shiksha, right? It is saying all this is shiksha. So let's understand each in a little detail. What is matra? Duration of vocalization in reference to time. Okay, so you have different matras. You have hrasva, dirgha, and then you have pluta. So pluta is 3 times as long, and then you also have something called ardhamatra or half, which refers to a vyanjana, right, or a consonant without the swara. So that becomes the ardhamatra. Now, what is balam? So one is, of course, how long you stretch each thing that you're saying. Then what is balam? Whether you're saying it forcefully or how much vocal effort you're putting, right? That could be one angle. Another is internal side, which is abhyantara prayatna, and then the external, which is bahya prayatna. Okay, this is before pronunciation and during pronunciation. Then you have sama, which is reference to correct space between the letters during pronunciation. So that's why Sama Veda comes from that, because you're literally singing, changing the spacing. Whatever is there in the Rig Veda, same thing is there in Sama Veda, but then it's stretched and changed. The position of how you enunciate and sing it is changed. So again, that becomes a Sama, right? Then you have Santanaha, which is pronunciation flow obtained through the correct combination in the union of letters. So this is like an early concept of Sandhi, Santan, child. Yeah. Yes, Ashwinji.
Does this change the meaning as well? For example, if you change the space between, or if you pronounce a word with more balam or less balam,
Yes,
so
there's
does the
also an
meaning also
example of why Shiksha is required. I'll cover that as well. So, Twashtra actually wanted Indra to be defeated, but because while praying, he enunciated it, he said everything correctly, but he put emphasis on the wrong akshara. The meaning became reverse. So, yeah, we'll look at that as well. And that's why there was so much focus given on ucharana and saying it correctly, and also in a sense I would say restricting not everyone being able to say the mantras. Now, from today's perspective, that's seen as, blocking people's access. But if I had to take an example from today, like how we have cybersecurity, there's a concept of CIA, confidentiality, and all that, right? So in that also you have restricted access. Not everyone is given access to everything, and that's how you ensure the integrity. You ensure that the Excel file or the PPT has not been edited by someone. Sometimes when there are too many people working on it, there'll be like one person. I mean, it's happened with me. So they'll be like, okay, all of you stop working on the file. I'm going to like lock um, this file, or we're going to create a new PPT because too many people have worked on it. Or sometimes in the Excel you will lock the sheets. You don't want certain things being changed, right? So yeah, this was in an oral tradition. This was a way to ensure that no matter 2000 years ago or today, because of these rules that have been put in place, you are ensuring that when it's sung or being chanted, people are doing it exactly how they did it 3000 years ago or 5000 years, whatever.
Yes, sir.
So
Manusmriti has so many strict rules about who is allowed to chant, and it
right,
has related
I
to.
haven't gone into the details of Manusmriti yet, but I trust what you might have read, because I think you've gone through Manusmriti, right? You were going through it as well. Okay.
Basics, yes.
Okay, so now let's get into some of the things mentioned in Shikshavali, right? Shikshavali is interesting because it is like advice for a passing out student. So today we have the convocation and the, I think people throwing their hats in the air and then taking photographs. And I think it's the students who probably like give farewell speeches and all, but yeah, and sometimes maybe the teacher also does get in a few words, but here this is essentially a section of, okay, you are in a safe space in a gurukula. Now you're going to leave and face the real big bad world. So here are my final words of advice as an acharya to you as you pass out. So it's something like that. So Shikshavali essentially covers a lot of worldly wisdom, which many of which uh, I think are still relevant today, and also tells you what kind of culture Bharat had, right? So Vedam Anuchya Gurukulat Bahihi Gamanasya Purvam Acharyah Etat Shiksha Shishyan Dadati. I just explained. Bahihi Gatva Kim Kim Karaniyam iti Anushasanam Kriyate. Adau Satyam Vada Dharmam Chara iti Uchate. So that phrase that we know, Satyam Vada Dharmam Chara, comes actually from Shikshavali. Shrutyam yat vihitam karma tad dharma. So it's again describing dharma. Puna yat swadhyayanam nama swa shakhayam yat adhyayah vartate tadeva. So again, what should you focus on? Primary should be what is your shakha teaching, right? So that's why today we say, okay, your sampradaya is saying this. Okay, yes, follow that, right? So those concepts you can already see here. Tarkaha ma pramada. So again, follow logic. It even says that if your acharya is wrong, follow what is correct. So it even says until up to that extent. Okay, gurukulasya bahihi gatva jhatiti sanyasah na svikartavyam. Right? These things are there even in someone who hasn't gone to a gurukula. I think our parents might have said, right? Each thing has an age. Sannyasa should be in the when you grow older. You shouldn't immediately become a sannyasi at a young age. I think our society immediately reacts badly when a young person becomes a sannyasi, right? And again, that is because you have a dharma of actually having children. So, grihastashramam swikritya prajaha janitavyaha. So, you should undergo grihastashram and then you should have children. Satya dharmayoho kadachit api na pramadah. Okay, don't forget. Kushalam nama atmaraksha iti. Pitru deva karyam na pramaditavyam. So do not neglect your pitru karya, right? So the shraddha that you do, uh, and also other related duties that you have. यानि आचार्यैः उच्यते आचारः तेषु अनिध्यानि कार्याणि एव अनुवर्तनीयानि अन्यानि न सेवितव्यानि. So follow what your acharya says, not other things. However, it also says later that if your acharya is not in the right, you don't have to follow that as well. Vichintya vartitavyam. Always think before you follow something and do something. पुनः यत्र कुत्रापि ब्राह्मण सभां ज्येष्ठ सभां प्रविशति tatra katham vyavaharitabhyam iti api suchitam. So when you enter a new country, a new land, a place where there are scholars in a new place, how should your vyavahar be? Like how should you interact? How should you behave? शिष्यस्य उपनयनं कृत्वा षडंग सहितम उपनिषद सहितम वेदम यह अध्यापयति सह आचार्य. So it also is like describing acharya, right? So an acharya is someone who actually does the upanayana for you and teaches the shadanga, which is the Vedāngas. Okay, so that person is the acharya actually. That's the original definition. And even in Manusmriti you have this. Okay, so it's again describing the same thing. I think it's Gurukulat Bahihi, Panchami with Bahihi. Gurukulat Bahihi Agatya Samshaya Asti Chet. So let's say you no longer have your Acharya, you don't have your friends around you who were from that, mindset, and you're having doubts in the real world. Katham Tasya Uttaram Nirnitavyam iti. Right? So in today's world, I think people go to hostel and then suddenly they don't know who they can go for guidance. Yes, always can't always call your parents. So what do you do in difficult situations? Katham tat karyam kartavyam iti prayena vispritavaन् atah संशयः भवति कदापि नूतन परिस्थिति आगच्छति चेत् कथं कर्तव्यम. So let's say you're in a new situation which you don't feel prepared for, or you forgot what you had learnt. So what should be followed is kula paramparayam agata tadrisha acharah. Okay. If you don't know that, katham kartavyam na janati chet, tat kshetre yad brahmanaha bhavanti, te yad kurvanti tathaiva kartavyam. So let's say you have forgotten your kulachara, right? Let's say due to colonization, we have forgotten our traditional, what was supposed to be followed in our households. So if you are unable to retrace your original achara, it is recommended in Shikshā follow whichever kshetra you are in. So, like for example, Vanajaji is from Parashurama Kshetra. So, what do the Brahmanas, the learned men of that, what is prescribed for to be done? Follow that, right? So, that's such a contrast to, let's say, an Abrahamic framework, which will expect others to impose. If you go to a new place, also you impose certain rules on others around you. Here, it's asking you to do the reverse. Okay, you don't know your rituals, follow what is already being followed in the community that you have entered, in the kshetra that you have entered. Okay, however, be careful who are the brahmanas. So parantu te brahmanah kushalaha yuktaha bhavet. So don't just follow any brahmana for the sake of them being a brahmana. They should be following yukti purvakam kurvanti anushthana api kurvanti. So they should be like not namesake brahmanas. Okay, they should be following the necessary rituals for their own nitya karmas, right? That's a very good indicator perhaps of whether they are worthy of being followed. Ye vina krodhena acharati. So those brahmanas should be following those rituals without anger. तादृशे ब्राह्मणाः यत् कुर्वन्ति तथैव करणीयम्. Okay, लाभाय न कर्तव्यम धर्म कामाय कर्तव्यम. Today I think most people, journalists, I think even researchers, they do it for labha, right? That's why they make these very crazy headlines, because it attracts attention. You're not doing it for um, dharma, you're doing it for some kind of labha. So when you do activities surrounding that, obviously dharma is not being followed. So um, anyway, हिरण्य श्राद्धं पितृपक्षे करणीयं, गया श्राद्धं पित्रा सह करणीयं, अमावास्या तर्पणं न त्यजनीयम्. Okay, now there is also other interesting things. It says things like bhutyai na pramaditavyam, don't deviate for money. Okay, kushalan pramaditavyam, do goodwill, do not neglect well-being of others. Swadhyaya pravachanabhyam kuru, so teach and practice. Yat adhitam tadna visprithavyam api chet anyaihi api adhyapaniyam. So what was learned should not be forgotten and has to be taught to others. And then ahankarena na vaktavyam, so don't speak with arrogance. Asanam datva nichaihi eva upavishtavyam. So this is when you have a elderly person or a acharya or a guru. So they should be given a higher spot and you should be seated lower. Shraddhaya dehi iti mantram, danam sarvada kartavyam. ekatram sarvatra dhanam na bhavet. Okay, so in a sense it's a little bit of socialism. So you shouldn't just accumulate wealth just for yourself, you should also be giving through dana. यथा श्राद्धे अपि द्वौ ब्राह्मणो अन्य अन्य गृहात् एव आह्वानं करोति. So during shraddha, you don't invite from the same family, you invite people from different families. That's because you want multiple households to be benefited. Now if you see on the right, this is again continuation of the same text from Shikshavalli. So see here, deva pitrkaryabhyam na prameditavyam matru devo bhava pitru devo bhava. See, that phrase also comes from here. Acharya devo bhava, atithi devo bhava. Okay, so all this you can see here. And an important concept here is the danasya hetavah. Okay, so there are uh, aspects to dana, and I think it's relevant even today. So one is shraddha, the other is shriya, hirihi, bhihi, and sambit. Okay, so what it says is shraddhaya deyam, give with reverence. So if you're giving a dana, you cannot give it unwillingly and without respect. Ashraddhaya adeyam, do not give without reverence. Okay, it's like a double emphasis. Shriya deyam, give with abundance. Don't be miserly when you're giving dana. Hriya deyam, give with modesty and sincerity. You shouldn't be feeling, extremely proud of yourself that, oh, I donated, right? And bhiya deyam, give with apprehension. So I uh, to be honest, I would love to hear Vanajaji's thoughts here, but um, I think in one interpretation you should have fear of consequence of not giving, but I would also, in the modern sense, interpret it as don't give it for wrong causes. Be be worried about who you're giving or how you're giving it. Then Samvida Deyam, give with the knowledge and understanding. So don't do it blindly, do it with understanding. So now let's come to the Vedānga Shikshā. Okay. Now Ram Prasad Tripathi has collected more than 30 plus texts in the topic of Shiksha, of which Pānini Shiksha is just one. Okay. And Pānini Shiksha is a small set of verses. And according to Dr. Manmohan Ghosh in 1938, who came up with this claim, according to him, only 18 verses were original in the shloka form of Anushtup Chanda, and later it was expanded to 60 verses. Okay. Now, the reason given for this is the Rigvedic Pratishakya have 60 verses, the Yajurvedic ones have 35 to 40 verses, and the Agni Purana, chapter 336, includes 21 verses of the Pandiniya Shiksha. Now, as we have covered earlier as well, when you have an oral tradition, just because something got added later or certain things are in lesser verses compared to other, doesn't necessarily mean that the entire thing is later dated. Um, I'm going to assume that all 60 verses are Paniniya Shiksha, and we will cover some verses from that today. Okay. So the 18 verses that Dr. Manmohan Ghosh considers as original core text of Paniniya Shiksha covers the concepts of articulation points, which is the sthana, effort, which is the prayatna, and the sound count, how many 64 aksharas, and the vocal tone accents, which is nothing what I said, udata, anudata, swarita. Incidentally, it also covers what are the bad qualities of a reciter. So it classifies poor reciters versus what is considered a good chanter, so someone who is chanting well. So yeah, things like singing or shaking your head or saying it too fast is an example of a bad chanter. So according to Shiksha, it is a you will not get any phala prapti, and on top of that, you will actually get a bad result for doing that. So for example, if you take the Gayatri mantra, very common it is to have it in that song version, right? Om Bhur Bhuhaswaha Tatsavitur Varenyam. Like, so that kind of song would not fit because it is supposed to be sung in a specific, like if you see like Ganapatha, I think you have good YouTube channel. So in the Yajurvedic form, how it should be actually chanted, you can see. Likewise, Samaveda also has its own format. So if a particular Vedic mantra has to be chanted in a specific way, you have to chant it in that way. You cannot be adding your own music to it and then singing it like a song. So those are considered bad. Uh, Incidentally, Pānini Shiksha also gives you the connection between our Udata, Anudata, Swarita, and the musical notes, which we see in the Gandharva Veda, right? So in verse 12, you see the link between that and the musical notes, which is the Nishadha, Gandhara, so on and so forth. And that's where the Samaveda aspect comes in. Now, keep in mind that according to Western scholars, Samaveda started afterwards, after Rig Veda. But from the traditional standpoint, everything existed, and Vyasa simply recategorized everything. Okay. So, but it's we should be careful to not just assume Shiksha is just phonetics, because, for example, the Rig Tantra explains the lineage of transmission of sound. So that's what you see here on the right. It started with Brahma, who taught it to Brihaspati, and Brihaspati taught it to his disciple Indra, and from Indra, Indra that you see here, and from Indra it went to Bharadwaja, and then he taught it to his other Shishyas, and then from there it went to other uh, rishis and uh, other uh, shakhas. Okay. Now, if we look at Shiksha, a very important concept is Varnotpatti Sthana. And that's the reason I didn't want to start with Pānini, because typically we associate this with just Pānini Vyakarana. But this actually comes under Shiksha. And before Pānini as well, there were multiple people who have given their uh, thoughts on this. They have described what aspects of Shiksha are important. So if you see here, different sounds come from different parts of your body, right? So the chest or the from the chest you have ha, from kantha you have a, a. From the base of the tongue, which becomes the jivva moola, you get ka, kha. And then when you do the curled tongue, which is in English it's called retroflex, okay? So that becomes your r and l, okay? I'm probably not saying that right. Then you have teeth, which is the danta, which becomes ta, the, dha, okay? Then you have the base of the teeth becomes ra. Then you have the talu, which is the roof of the cavity, which is e, cha, cha, okay, or so on and so forth that you see there. Then you have oshtha, which requires you to close the lips and open it. So it is pa, pa, ba, pa, ma, okay. Then you have kantatalu, which is starting with the throat and ending in the palatal area. So a, I, okay. Kantha, oshtha. So these are like mixed, right? Which becomes o, au. Danta oshtha, which is both teeth and lips, becomes v. Then you have the nasika, which is the na, nya, okay, the what you see here. And according to the origin, the sounds used in speech are either 63 or 64, and this difference is mentioned in Pānini Shiksha itself. Of these, 21 are swaras or vowels, 25 types of sound endings, 8 together formed of semi-vowels, and other things such as yamas. So there are 4 yamas which you see, which were the nasika related sounds. Okay. Now in Yajnavalkya Shiksha, the anuswara is long after a short vowel, but short after a long vowel. So what it says is वर्णे तु मात्रिके पूर्वे ह्यनुस्वारो द्विमात्रिकः द्विमात्रिके मात्रिकः स्यात् संयोगाद्यश्च यो भवेत्. When an anuswar is after a short vowel and before a samyukta varna, it becomes short. Now you can test this out yourself. Now let's focus on Yajnavalkya Shiksha first. So Yajnavalkya Shiksha is part of Shukla Yajurveda. And Yajnavalkya is by tradition the founder of the Vajasaneyi school. Uh, but someone called Uvata quoted this text in his Bhashya on Vajasaneyi Pratishakya, and that Uvata is dated to the rule of Raja Bhoja, who in turn is dated to 1018. So some Indologists have dated Yajnavalkya Shiksha to 9th century CE, which I think is ridiculous. So as you can see, there are multiple assumptions here. One is Vata lived under Raja Bhoja. I do not know. We'll have to verify. Second, which Raja Bhoja? And is that even true? And can Raja Bhoja actually be dated to 1018 AD? Is he that late? So these are questions I have. Until I have answers to those, I will just say that this is a statement. I cannot say that Yagyavalkya Shiksha can be dated to 9 CE. And even if it is, um, if let's say something has been included from that period, I would say that particular verse perhaps has been included. I will not say the entire text is 9th century CE. Um, and some quote that this particular phrase, Panchavimshati Sparshaha Krishnaha Vyakhyataha Shanaichara Devataha. So because it's mentioning Shani Devata, it also has a Vishnu Sharma's commentary on Nimesho Matrakalaha. So since Vishnu Sharma of Panchatantra is dated to 5th century CE, some people date it to 5th century. Again, a lot of speculation. I'm just sharing what are the opinions that already exist. I don't necessarily agree with them. But what does Yagyavalkya Shiksha actually cover? So it covers character of speech, study of Varna, which is the letter. So note here that Varna here is letter. Classification of sound according to the place of articulation. We just saw that sthana, right, of Varnotpatti. Quantification of sound, which was the matra that we saw, the pluta, dirgha, hrasva. The accents or the tones, which is the swarita, udata, anudata, and the symbolic representation of how you do it, and an interesting concept of a swara bhakti. Okay, and then the concept of sandhi, which is different from what Pānini established in his Ashtadhyayi. Now, according to Yagyavalkya Shiksha, there are three types of tones, as we already saw: udata, anudata, swarita. So, udatascha, chanudatascha, swaritascha tathaivata, lakshanam varnayishyami, daivatam sthanameva. It also mentions that there are 8 types of swarita, which is very interesting. So there are so many variations in those tones. And while Paniniya Shiksha briefly mentions musical tones, Yagyavalkya Shiksha explicitly maps the three accents to the classical 7 note scale: Shadja, Rishabha, Gandhara, Madhyama, Panchama, Dhaivata, and Nishada. So in the Yagyavalkya Shiksha, you can see the direct mapping between how from the Vedic tones the Sangita Shastra actually evolved. Okay. Now, this I actually picked from Wisdom Library, and this is another example of why we have to be very careful about what we assume. So, Yagyavalkya Shiksha says that one matra, which is the quantification of the duration, is compared to a note of a woodcock, is what the English translation said. But I realized that that is incorrect. I actually looked at what the actual practitioners today compare that uh, translation of Chashastu as, and that is a Neelakantha. Okay, so what you see here is a Eurasian woodcock. So I actually looked it up. Does the woodcock make such a noise? The woodcock does not make a noise that is equivalent to one matra. I looked up the Neelakantha Pakshi, and I have recorded the audio of that as well, and I will play it. So you should all be able to hear. Can you hear? Neelakantha actually matches the one matra in my opinion. So I think very often we have to be careful about what is already been translated into English. So what it basically says is Chashastu vadate matram dvimatram bayaso vravivit Shikhi vadati trimatram matranam miti samsthiti. Okay. So Neelakanta is one matra duration. Quantity of 2 matra is compared to the cawing of the crow. Okay. So it goes ka ka, right? So that becomes the two matras, and 3 matras equivalent to a pluta, which is by the shikhi, which is nothing but the peacock.
This cock which is crowing now.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one is lagu. Prasva. Then the second one is dirgha, and the third one is
Yeah,
male rooster.
correct. No, I agree. I think that's
So
also a
that
good example.
also, yeah, that is also there to kind of give an, an understanding on the samaya of the.
Correct. No, absolutely. Great point, Vanajaji. So, what we have is there are three types of virama. Okay. According to Yagyavalkya Shiksha, and they are Rig Virama, Pada Virama, and Avagraha Virama. Okay. So, Rig Virama is in the verse itself, there is a pause. At the end of a verse, the duration equivalent to three matras is the pause that you give. Padavirama is the duration between two words, and that will be equal to two matras. And Avagraha Virama is the duration of an Avagraha, which is equivalent to half a matra. Okay. So what you see here is Eka matro bhavet, Hrisvo dvimatro dirgha uchyate, trimatras uh, trimatrastu plutogneyo. I think we already covered this in English, so that's what it's saying here. Now, can you see this? I did one step further. So I checked whether the Neelakantha is distributed across Bharat or not. So if you use Occam's razor, which is like the easy, simplest explanation is the solution that you should go with, you can clearly see that I believe it is indeed the Neelakantha, which is the Chashastu here. Okay. You can see how when it migrates down south, it is for the during the winters, there's high concentration of them in Bharat as opposed to other parts. Yeah, and this is again another example when when people say that Vedas were composed outside India. I mean, when if you are following Occam's razor, you're going to use the example of what is around you, right? So it cannot be Iran. I mean, yeah, Iran, some parts, but not that far away. It cannot be Central Asia as well. As you can see, it's very brief. The maximum concentration is actually on the Europe side and in Bharat side, and incidentally Thailand, right? So yeah, that's another way I just cross-verified. Manivad vyanjananyavuhu sutravat swara ishyate vyanjananya anuvartat anuvartante yatra tishtati saswaraha. So the vyanjana or the consonant are like pearls in a necklace, but the thread which supports them is the swara. Okay. So Naradiya Shiksha also supports this description. So this Shiksha compares swara to a powerful Raja and the vyanjana to a weak Raja. The letters submitting to the force of the former. So basically, from the Bharatiya standpoint, the swara is the more powerful one, and the vyanjana is like a less powerful one. Okay, so durbalasya yatha rashtram harate balvan nripaha durbalam vyanjanam tadvat harate balvan swaraha. Okay, this is the Naradiya Shiksha, the second one, but it's essentially saying the same thing. And when you talk about Sandhi, Yagyavalkya Shiksha mentions four kinds of Sandhi, and note they are very different from what Pānini teaches in Vyakarana for Sandhi, right? So one is Lopa, vanishing. Next is Agama, which is augmentation. So something will arrive and then get added in the Sandhi. Then you have Vikara, which is a modification or a change. And then fourth is Prakriti Bhava, okay? So retention of the original form. Then it also describes seven kinds of Vyanjan Sandhi, which again are very different from what you would expect from the Vyakarana of Pānini. Okay, so very interesting names. Urna Pinda, okay, which is nothing but wool cluster. Okay, then Jwala Pinda, which is cluster of fire collection. Then you have Mrit Pinda, which is mud. Then Vayu Pinda, which is wind. Vraja Pinda, which is thunder. You have then Ayapinda, which is iron, and then Daru Pinda, which is wood. So, according to Yagyavalkya, he has classified the various types of Vedic language sandhis into these seven for Vyanjan. One more thing, you might have seen during Vedic chants, people often use their hand, right? You might have even seen some hand movements. That is very important. In fact, Shiksha teaches that a person who chants without doing those hand movements will be reborn as an inferior animal. Okay, so it is very important that you use those hand movements as well. So Yagyavalkya Shiksha also mentions this. It describes the hand gestures, swara hasta, finger and hand mudras, Hastaswara used by reciters to physically mark the Udata, Anudata, and Swarita during live chanting of the Shukla Yajurveda. Okay, Pāniniya Shiksha only mentions this theoretically, whereas Yagyavalkya Shiksha goes into detail. Okay, then here what you have is description of Dashadha Varna Bhavanti Aurasa Kanthya Murdhanya Dantyoshtha Talavya Dantamuliya Jivva Muliya Yamanuswarascheti. So it's basically what we saw, right? So you have Aurasha Varna, which is basically from the chest or lungs, Murdhanya Varna from the top of the oral cavity. You have Talavya Varna, Dantya Varna, Oshtya Varna, Dantamulya Varna, okay, and Jihva Mulya Varna. So these are the various types of Varna, classification based on where the Varnotpatti is happening. And what you see as Shiksha Sangraha is nothing but the work done by that person that I mentioned earlier who collected various Shiksha texts that are available. It says that the Dantya Varna are 8 in number. I don't even think I can do the Ucharana of these correctly. So you have E, 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 okay. The Ta, Tha, Da, Dha, Na, Lakara Sakara iti. Okay. Yajnavalkya also mentions Oshtya Varna are 9 in number. So you have Nava Aushtyaha U U U. Okay, so this is the third one, the Pluta, right? Iti Uvarna Papha Babha Ma Vakaropa Vakara Upadmaniya Okarascheti. Okay. Now you and then you have what was introduced as Ayogavaha, which is nothing but Anuswara, which is the dot that you put on top. Instead of Ma, you put that dot on top, that becomes Anuswara. Then you have Visarga, which is the Aha that you end Rama iti with, right? So then you have the Upadmaniya, which you saw here, which is nothing but, let's say there is Ramaha Patati. Okay, then that becomes Rama Patati. Yeah, Rama Patati. So that becomes Upadmaniya. Then you have Jihva Muliya, which is Rama Khadati. Okay, there's a little bit of naturally shortened Visarga. So that becomes Rama Khadati. Okay, so that becomes your Jihva Muliya. Here, there is a slight fa sound that gets added, not too obvious, but when you say Rama Patati, when you say it fast, automatically the little bit of fa sound will come. Okay, so that is the Upadmaniya. Yagyavalkya Shiksha also says Eko Danta Muliyo Repha. So basically it says that there is only one Varna which is Danta Muliya, and then it says Sapta Jivva Muliya. So I am introduced Jivva Muliya here, right? So Rama Khadati. So Sapta Jivva Muliya, you have R, 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 okay, Ityu Varna, Upadmaniya, Kakha, Gagha, Nya, iti. Chatvaro Yama. So this again, I'm not the right person to do the Ucharana. You have Kung, Kung, Gung, Gung. Okay, so these are the 4 Yamas. And finally, a very interesting concept which you see here, Swara Bhakti, which means appearance of a consonant as Swara. Okay, and I'll explain what an example. Many times a semi-vowel which consists of one letter has to be divided, especially for purpose of Chandas. So according to Keshavi Shiksha, Swara Bhakti vowel Swara should be pronounced like A. Okay, and see the example. So let's say you have Darshatam. Okay, Darshatam. With Swara Bhakti, Darshatam becomes Dare Satam. And in my opinion, this makes it sound a little bit more like Farsi. And here you can see that maybe the rule change led to evolution of Farsi as well. So what is Darshatam with Swara Bhakti becomes Dare Satam. There is that A that gets added. So I'm not sure if this is something we'll have to look into further, but when I saw this example immediately, that's what came to my mind, that okay, that connection with Farsi I'm able to see here.
So, Varunji, I had
Yes.
listened to, I had read long time back. He talked about Kanjipuram Shankaracharya,
Uh-huh.
okay, Chandrasekhar Swamigal, what they call Periyava.
Hmm.
So apparently, he had a discussion on Shiksha and
Hmm.
how the pronunciation changes as per the geography.
Wow.
Okay,
Okay.
and so this conversation, I'm not able to find it. If I find it, I will share it. This
Hmm.
conversation was in context of a few people from from Israel had come
Okay.
and were talking to him about the Vedas. So he started saying that some of the things which are in your Torah are
Hmm.
also in the Vedas. So then what he said is, if you change this akshara to this, if you change this akshara to this, if you change this akshara to this, what do you get? And apparently they were able to reconstruct some things in the Torah. Okay.
Hmm.
And also, if you look at the Latvian language and the similarity with Sanskrit, you will see that many of the changes are actually geographical.
Right.
Right? So I just thought I will
No,
just
no,
say
thank you
this.
for that. And maybe I will also look based on what you just mentioned. I'll see if I'm able to find. Okay, so what you see on the right is just an example of how what we consider a simple actually has 18 variations. It's crazy, right? So the can be in Hrisva, Dirgha, or Pluta, right? As we already saw the stretching. On top of that, there are the tones. You have Udata, Anudata, Swarita. So you have three threes of each. You can do can be done Pluta of Udata, Anudata, Swarita. On top of that, you have Anunasika and Ananunasika. So totally you get 18 variations for Then likewise you get 18 variations for E. You get 18 variations for U, so on and so forth. Notice it's not 18 for all. For others like L and A, I, O, Au, it's little lower, but it's literally crazy how many variations there are, right? Now, in the Vedas and in our Bharat itself, we have a strong belief. Of course, if you're a non-believer, it's a different point. If you do the Ucharana correctly, you get the power, Phalaprapti of that particular Sukta. So let's say, for example, you have Aprati Ratha Suktam, which is there in the Rig Veda of Mandala 10. Okay. So if you chant it correctly, or even if you listen to it, see, you don't always have to be the one who's chanting. If you get as a Yajamana, you get that person to chant it as part of any ceremony, or you happen to be a listener who's listening to that, you get the benefit because you listen to it, right? That is the belief of Bharat Desha. Let's say you take this particular sukta, which is found in the Rig Veda Mandala 10 and in Krishna Yajurveda of Taittiriya Samhita, which translate to hymn of the invincible chariot. Okay, so again, check the YouTube channel Ganap Bharti, I think it's called. Very great Yajurvedi chants you can find. Sometimes other people have also chanted, very well chanted. So there you can find an example. It is a mantra meant by the mantra drashtara apratiratha. Okay, so he is a mantra drashtara. So as I said, these are not written down. These are people who have received insight, and that is why you associate certain people with certain suktas, and then you have a devata as well, right? So he invokes Indra, Brihaspati, and the devas to break through hostility, instill courage, and shield defenders from all forms of aggression, both physical and spiritual. So the belief is that if you listen to the sukta or if you chant the sukta correctly, then you can repel aggressors and even hostile armies. Okay. Likewise, you have the Aikamatya Suktam. Okay, and this is also known as the Sangyana Sukta of the 10th Mandala. Okay, Sukta 191 of Rig Veda, and this is a celebration of unity, harmony, collective consciousness, and peace. Okay, Sahachintana. So again, the belief is that if you chant Aikamatya Suktam, or if you listen to Aikamatya Suktam, or if it's performed in a large space, you can produce that effect of feeling of peace, harmony, and cooperation. And as you can see, there is a direct connection to how this impacts Sangita Shastra, right? In Sangita Shastra, if you sing certain songs that have certain bhava, certain qualities, certain ability to create rain, right? So you can directly see the connection between how the Vedas, the Suktas, how you're chanting directly is translating into the swaras and into Sangita Shastra as well, in terms of how you can create a change in your environment. And Ashwinji, you asked about how the Varna Ucharana makes a difference. So what you see here on the right is the mistake that Twashta made. Okay, so I'm just saying it without the Swarita and all that, but Indra Shatru Vardhasva. Okay, notice the difference in where you're going into um, the upper emphasis versus the lower emphasis. What he did was, where the Urdha should have gone higher, he went lower, and where it should have been stable in the, I think this is the Udata. Yeah, Swarita is on top, Udata is here, and yes, I think that's what I see here. So he did it incorrectly. So basically, Varna was correct, all the Varnas were correct, but the Swara was wrong, because of which Twashta prayed for Asura Vritra to be able to defeat Indra, but because he emphasized Tr instead of Dra, instead the meaning changed and it became may Vritra be defeated by Indra. And that's what happened. So Indra then defeated Vritra. So
So there is basically what I understood is that depending on the positioning of the swaras and where the udata anudata comes, the samasa is deconstructed. So one becomes a bahuvrihi samasa, okay, and the other becomes a I think it's a karmadare or something. What is this? Indrasya shatru vardhasva, right? So it is it Indrena Shatru Vardhasva or Indrasya Shatru Vardhasva? So it that meaning changes because of which, because of the Uddata Anudata. So it's the Samasa Vigraha which gets affected because of the Swaras.
thank you, Ranjaji. I think you explained that very well.
This is Dhananjay Acharya told us in class once.
No. So this is there in the Pāniniya Shikshā, and it's also mentioned in the Taittiriya, that is Pāniniya Shikshā, which is in the Taittiriya Samhita 2.412. Okay. So moving ahead, you have Prakriti Patha, which is a natural chanting order, which is the normal chanting where the sequence of words remains linear. It has three parts: Samhita Patha, Pada Patha, and Krama Patha. Okay. So Samhita Patha, you have continuous chanting with full Sandhi. Pada Patha, you have reciting word by word with the Sandhi broken down. And then you have Krama Patha, which is chanting in 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4 overlapping sequence. Okay. There is something called the Ashta Vikriti recitation method. So the 8 types of Vikriti Patha are called Jata. Okay. Actually, let me read this directly. You have Jata, Mala, Shikha, Rekha, Dhwajo, Dando, Ratho, Ghanaha, Ashtau Vikratayah, Proktaha, Krama Purva, Maharshibhi. Okay. So you have Jata, which is how you braid your hair, Mala, which is a necklace, Shikha, which is the peak, Rekha, which is a line, Dhwaja, which is the banner or the flag, Danda, which is a stick, Ratha, which is a chariot, and Ghana, which is the cloud. So let's look at just an example of Jata Patha. But essentially how that works is, in Jata recitation, you first do Krama, which is 1, 2. So you'll chant the first and the second word. Okay. Then you'll do Vyut Krama, which is going in reverse direction, 2, 1. Then you'll do Sankrama, which is again you will repeat 1, 2. And then finally you do Anuloma, which is 1, 2. Okay. And all of this is done with Sandhi. Okay. And Anuloma is Samhita form of the Viloma taken in Pada form. So let's take the example of Tatsa Vitur Vare Enyam. Okay. Okay. Tatsa Vitur Vare Enyam. Okay. Let's take that. So how will that go? Tat becomes 1, Savitu becomes 2. Okay. Varenyam will become 3. Okay. And then how does the Gayatri Mantra go? You have Dhimahi, right? So Dhimahi will become the 6th one if you follow that order. So now let's look at it. You have Jatapatha. How you will memorize it, how you will do the practice of Veda is Tat Savetu Savetu Tat Savetu. Okay, it'll go like this: 1, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2. Okay. Next, you will again go 2, 3, 3, 2, 2, 3. So that means you'll go Savetu Savetur. Okay, no, actually 2, 3, 3, 2, 3. So you'll go Savitu Vare Enyam Savitu Savitu Vare Enyam. Okay, you'll go like that. So you're like going like in a particular pattern, you're moving forward, little back, little forward, little back. Now, why would all this be necessary in an era without AI, where you can just tap something and get the entire verse? How do you ensure that people, as the phrase goes, I think in India, even if I wake you up in the middle of the night, you should be able to chant it for me? How does that happen? That happens because of these techniques which are there in Shiksha of Veda Patha. Okay, you are memorizing the verses in such a manner that you're breaking it apart, and you're putting that entire thing into memory in a way that you know how each sandhi works within that entire verse. Okay, so there are different ways of recitation and practice. Let's look at Shiksha across the
The
Vedas.
other reason why this has been done, like you have the
Hmm.
Padapata, Kramapata, Ghanapata, is because sometimes if the Ucharan is not correct,
Hmm.
something can be swallowed and forgotten. But because there's redundancy, okay, because you're doing 1 2 2 3 3
Hmm.
2 2, 3 3 4 4, like that, you're going. The padas are very clearly multiple times, and every time you do it, the pada changes. Especially if you've listened to Ganapata,
Hmm.
it changes because that specific sandhi is applicable. So then there is no doubt at all as to what that pada is, because that pada is said in multiple ways with multiple sandhis with multiple things around it. So that redundancy is done, and therefore the authenticity of the Vedic mantras are maintained.
Hmm.
So that is why this is the main reason. Basically, it's more like
And
like how we
I
sell
think
packet
ensuring
software, no?
error correction, right? Ensuring there
Error,
is
yeah. Basically, redundancy in recitation in multiple ways makes sure that the errors don't creep in.
creep in. Correct.
So you can
Correct.
always go back and deconstruct it. A
Correct.
Ganapati, if a Padapatha is has a doubt, the Ganapati
We'll
is
be able to
considered the
explain.
most superior guy because he
Hmm.
knows all the different ways to say it. And he'll come back and say, no, you have not said this right. You have
Right.
swallowed this pada over here.
So it's in a way, it's like human based correction, right? So today,
Correct,
like AI
correct.
agents are correcting each
Yeah,
other.
that is why the Vedic mantras even today have
Hmm.
not got distorted at all. Whereas if you see the Ramayana, Mahabharata, all the Smritis, na,
Hmm.
there are many, many versions of the Smritis. There are a lot of, even Bhagavad Gita has
Hmm.
one or two verses which people say it differently.
Hmm.
But in the Vedic mantras, there is no difference at all because of these methods of transmission.
Uh, yeah, moving on.
Sorry for
No, no, no. Thank you
jumping.
for that. So, moving on, you have the other shikshas that are across other Vedas. So you have this Samana Shiksha Sutra, okay, which is the Sama, okay, sorry, not Samana, which is Samana only, which is the appendix of the Rig Veda, which focuses specifically on Visarga, the okay. Then you have a Bharadvaja Shiksha, which contains an alphabetical index of the definitions used in Yajurveda. So that's why I say it's not just about phonetics. We should not reduce Shiksha to just phonetics. You have Narada Shiksha, which discusses about the musical angle. Okay, so and it's associated with Samaveda. Then you have Manduki Shiksha, which again talks about when you see the word accents, you are referring to Swarita, Udata, Anudata. Okay, so that is it's there in the Atharva Veda. Then you have something like Vashishta Shiksha, okay, which is again associated with Yajurveda, um, and it shifts from general phonetic classification to micro adjustments required during oral transmission. So, for example, rules for consonant doubling, dvitva, during continuous recitation in the Samhita Patha. Now, again, Pānini Shiksha only touches on sound positions, the sthana, and internal effort, prayatna, but leaves this aspect open ended. Then the nasal and visarga transformations, anunasika and visarga. What are the changes depending upon immediate environment of the surrounding letters? And this varies depending upon the specific shakha. Okay. Then focus on chanting faults, Gana dosha, or which includes issues related to vocal strain, improper breath control, structural errors specific to Vedic performance. Okay, and again more detailed than Paniniya Shiksha. Then you have Madhyandina Shiksha, which is again a Yajurveda, Shukla Yajurveda, and this one has 28 verses. It is concerned with proper Vedic recitation, sounds, pronunciation, accents, length, and rules for preservation of oral transmission. This Madhyandina Shiksha and Kanva Shiksha and Kanva, these two, Madhyandina and Kanva, are two versions within the Shukla Yajurveda, and the rules are very close overall. Some mantras have small wording differences or different placements. A few passages are arranged differently, and the Kanva schools is slightly longer with a few additional verses of 211 approximately. So now if you look at Samaveda Shiksha, in Samaveda Shiksha, the focus, of course, a lot of what we already covered is there, but additionally, because you are singing, there is some additional terms and concepts, right? So for example, in the Samaveda Samhita, you can divide into Archika and Gana, okay? So you have Purvarchika, Uttararchika, Gramageya, Aranya, Uha and Uhya, okay? So in that, there are 6 types of samvikara, which are changes made to the mantra. So one is vikara, vishleshana, vikarshana, abhyasa, virama, and stobha. Incidentally, in Samaveda Shiksha and also in the Pānini Shiksha, it says a mantra which is uttered with a defective accent or a bad pronunciation does not carry the proper meaning. It is a thunderbolt of speech and kills the Yajamana, the sponsor of the Yagna, just as it was done by the wrong accent of the Indra Shatru. So here it's a indirect reference, in my opinion, to that Twashta scenario. So just as Indra destroyed Vritra, same way, if you are, if the Yajamanas chanting incorrectly, they will be, destroyed just the same way by Indra. Okay, so this is there in the Samaveda Shiksha and in the Pānini Shiksha. Now, speaking of those 6 varieties, so you have Vikara, which is where the pronouncing an altered word in place of the words in the mantra to make the singing easy. Okay, so example would be Agnaye instead of Agne. So, Ognaye. I think it's written Ognaye. Okay. So if you see the Rig Veda chanting and the equivalent same verse in Samaveda, you might notice these differences. Vishleshana, dividing a mantra pada into 2 or more parts. So it would be like Voi Toi, okay, instead of Vitaye. Then you have Vikarshana, which is pronunciation of a long swara in place of a hrisva swara and pronouncing pluta swara in place of a dirgha, basically extending. So vikarshana is the extension that you might see in Samaveda. Abhyasa is reciting any word in the mantra 2 or more times. Okay. Virama is a pause, so it is done more for the singing, for that impact when you're singing. Stobha, okay, now this is very interesting, which you might notice in Samaveda chanting. So it is addition of certain words which don't impact the meaning, overall meaning. So it could be like au ho how. Okay, so when you heard things like this, these are additions being done in Samaveda which don't alter the original meaning in the Rigvedic verse. Okay, these are called stobha. So these are like the alankara. So just like in kavya alankara you have alankar, like that this is the alankar to the Vedic verses. Okay, so Kautumiya Shakha, it adds how and rai. Okay, Raniniya Shakha adds havu and rai. Now Naradiya Shiksha is mostly in the Anushtubh Chandas and mainly deals with theories and practices of singing in the Samaveda. It deals with musical notes and Ucharana. It is regarded as the source for the Shastriya Sangeeta, which is nothing but which later evolved into Hindustani and Carnatic music. And it is believed to predate Bharata's Natya Shastra. Okay, so according to Taittiriya Upanishad, the elements of chanting have 6 factors: Varna, Swara, Matra, Balam, Sama, and Santana. If you recall, this was already covered earlier, right? The first 4 deal with correct pronunciation, and the last 2 deal with recitation of the entire line of the verse. In the Naradiya Shiksha, again, what it says, Shadjo vadati mayuraha, gavo rambhanti charshabhaha, ajo vadati gandharaha, krauncha nadam cha madhyamaha, pushpa sadharane kale kokilaha panchame sware, ashvastu dhaivate prahaha, Kunjarastu Nishadamam. So what is it saying? It's essentially mapping the Saregama Padanisa. Okay. So Sa comes from the peacock, Ri from the Rishabha, the bull, Ga from the goat, Ma from the crauncha bird, the same crauncha bird which was killed, which got our Itihasa also started. Pa from the cuckoo, Dha from the horse, Ni from the elephant. Okay. And here you can see the direct mapping between what is the Samaswara and later became the Saregamapa. Okay. So what is the Sama Prathama is the Madhyama of the today's Sangeeta Shastra. What is the Samavedas Dvitiya is the Gandhara. Samavedas Tritiya is the Rishabha. Samavedas Chaturtha is the Shadja. Samavedas Panchama is the Nishada. Samavedas Shasta, the sixth one is the Shasta, is the Daivata, Dha, and the Saptama becomes the Pa. Okay. Now, according to Naradiya Suktam, Shadja delights the Devatas, Devanam. Rishabha delights the Rishis, Rishinam. Gandhara delights the Pitru. Okay. Madhyama delights the Gandharvas. And Nishada delights the Yakshas. And Daivata is giving happiness to all other living beings, the Pranina. Okay. Interestingly, Naradiya Shiksha also maps the swaras to colors. Okay. So in the Sukta 1.4.1, you have Shadja is associated with reddish color like lotus. Rishabha has reddish yellow, okay, like a parrot. Gandhara has a gold color. Madhyama is the color of jasmine. Panchama is a bluish black. Daivata is yellow. And Nishada has all colors. And as we know, Rasa theory is unique to Bharat Desha. In the Natya Shastra theory of aesthetics, which is unique to us, the Rasa is the supreme bliss of aesthetic joy. It says Raso Vaisaha Rasam Hyovayam Labdva Anandi Bhavati. This is Taittiriya Upanishad. Okay. Later, of course, the colors were also mapped with the rasas, and that became mapped with the musical notes. So you have one full spectrum of connection between the visual, the auditory, as well as the visual and auditory, and the rasa. So the third one is your experience, anubhava. These are visualizations of the various musical notes. Okay. So Narada mentions 6 grama ragas like Shadava, Panchama, Madhyama grama, Shadja grama, Kaishiki, and Kaishiki Madhyama, which remained in use till the 7th century, okay, AD. In ancient music theory, the function of Varna is to manifest a song. Thank you, Anajaji. Also known as the Gana Kriya, okay, and the Varna is said to be of 4 kinds: Arohi, Avarohi, Sthai, and Sanchari. So different alankars evolved from those 4 varnas. Now from Arohi Varna evolved 12 alankaras such as Vistirna, Nishkarsha, Bindu, okay, so on and so forth. Bharata later arranged the 22 Shrutis on the basis of 5 parent Shrutis as indicated by Narada, which is Tivra, Kumudavati, Manda, Chandovati, and Dayavati, okay, which are termed as Jatis or Ardhas or parent Shrutis. And much later, Sarangadeva in Sangeeta Ratnakara lists the names of these 22 varieties, vidhas, of the 5 Adhara Shrutis. Okay, if this is sounding dry, basically this is like the foundations for Sangeeta Shastra, which is coming from the Naradiya Shiksha. Okay. Now, the priests who sing the mantras at the yajna are designated as Udgatra. Okay, so derived from Udgita, to sing high or loud. And Chandogya Upanishad explains the term Udgita by splitting it into 3 syllables. Udgita. Okay, Ud means breath, prana. In high pitch, Uttishati. Okay, and Gir refers to speech, Vaggi. Okay. Samaveda Samhita came to be compiled for the use and guidance of Udgatra, a group of 3 singers. So they are the Prastotra, Udgatra, and Pratihartra. So these 3 together will sing the Samaveda, and they will sing it in 5 stages. So there is a Prastava, the initial portion of the mantra sung by the Udgatra designated as the Prastotra. So one of the three is the Prastotra, and they will start the Prastava, and they will start with a deep hu sound, okay, hunkara. Then you have the Udgita section, which is step 2. Here the chief Ritvik, okay, designated the chief Udgatra, who sings his portion of the Rik, commences with an elongated Omkara, okay. Then the third stage is Pratihara. The mid portion is sung loudly by the Pratihartra. So this person will praise the Devata to whom the Rik is addressed, okay. Then the fourth stage is Upadrava. The chief Udgatra sings again. Then you have Nidhana. The final portion is sung by all together, and it commences with a Onkara. Okay. When a mantra as per the above format is sung 3 times, it is called a stoma. So some texts describe this set of these 5 stages, which is the Prastava, Udgita, Pratihara, and Upadrava and Nidhana as Bhakti. Its number is extended to 7 by adding Hunkara and Onkara. Okay, so this is how the Samaveda is sung based on the Rig Veda, and this is the process as described. Now, very quickly, I know maybe you've been patient with me, so I won't take too much time, but now let's look at Pānini Shikshā. Okay, and I've added the link as well, and I'll share the link later. So what does it start with? If I'll just take some select verses, the breath circulating within the lungs creates the soft mandra tone. This is connected with the morning offering, Prata Savana, and rests in the Gayatri Chandas. Okay, that's what the first verse says. Not first verse, this is the what the 7th verse says. Okay, this 8th verse continues. The same breath circulating in the throat produces the Madhyama tone and relates to the midday offering. Okay, and follows a Trishtub Chandas. And the shrill Tara tone, which is produced by the breath circulating in the roof of the mouth, relates to the 3rd offering of the day and follows the Jagati Chandas. So again, the very act of doing that Ucharana becomes equivalent to doing the offering in the various Chandas. Okay. Maybe I'll go ahead because we're running out of time. Yeah, so let's take the last one here at the bottom. So, O Bhavascha, okay, Vivritischa, Shashasa Repha Evacha, Jihva Moolam Upadmacha, Gatirashta Vidhoshmanam. Okay, so what is this saying? Visargas have 8, okay, varieties. They can change. The Visarga can become O, it can vanish, it can become Sha, it can become Ra, okay. So let's look at an example. If you take Vishnu Sahasranamam, Vishwam Vishnur Vashatkaro, okay. So actually it's Vishnu Vashatkaraha. That aha, that Visarga became O. Why is that? So that's what's being explained here. O Bhavascha. So that can become O. The Visarga can become O. It can become Repha. When does it become Repha? Let's take the example of Harihi. Harihi Gachati becomes Harir Gachati. So again, it's describing the different changes that can happen to Visarga when you are chanting. Okay. Here it mentioned Jivva Muliya Upadma, right? So this one is an example of Visarga plus Ka or Kha. Like I said, when you say it together, that Jivva Muliya, little bit of Ka sound comes, and your Ardhamatra gets shortened. You don't have that much of a gap. Then you have Upadmaniya, where the first sound gets added because when there is a pa after or a pha after a visarga. Okay. Sometimes it becomes sha. When does it become sha? If the visarga is followed by cha, and sha, then it becomes sh. Okay. So let's take this example here. So here it sometimes becomes sa. So this visarga vanishes and becomes sadgati satkrita. Yeah? So the sa gets added here. That happens in some cases. Or it can become shatkon wala sha, and that happens when the visarga is followed by ta, and sha. Okay. So like this, you have explanation in Pānini Shikshā across the various verses. This one is an interesting one. As a tigress carries her cubs between the 2 rows of teeth, taking care that they should not be dropped or bitten, same way you should pronounce the Vedic mantras. so that they are not dropped or mispronounced. Okay, let's look at the next one. Anaksharam hatayushyam viswaram vyadipeditam akshata shastra rupena vajram patati mastake. So when a mantra deficient in a syllable, uh, it tends to diminish life. Okay, and when it is lacking the proper accent, it makes the reciter troubled with illness. So just imagine, if you are chanting it incorrectly, it's saying that you will end up with health problems or you will have bad things happen to you. Okay, again, based on prayatna, we saw the varnotpatti. Based on origin, it's classified, right? The various varnas are classified into various mula, jivva, muliya, or whatever. So here you have sprishta, which is when the tongue touches the place where the sound is produced. So there's another way of classifying the varnas, and that is into sprishta. This becomes the example that you see here: ka, kha, ga, gha. Yeah, okay. Then you have isha sprishta. While generating these sounds, the tongue only slightly touches the place where the sound is produced. So basically, this is about prayatnas, about your connection between the tongue and the source of the sound. Okay. Then you have isha dvivrita. Okay. Here the throat only partially opens while making the sound. Sh, sh. Okay. Then you have vivrita. While producing these sounds, the throat is completely open. E. Okay. Then you have samvrit. This throat is constricted while pronouncing, which is okay. Vismaya. Okay, so you are constricting yourself. Chashastu vadate matram dvimatram chaiva vayasah shikhi rauti trimatram tu nakulastva nakulastva dharmatrakam. So here there is one more creature getting added, right? So here it is mentioning Chasha lets out one matra, crow two matras, peacock three matras, and the mongoose only half a matra. Okay, so if you've ever heard the mongoose, it's a very short sound that it makes. It can make longer sounds also. That short sound is the ardha matra. Regarding the hasta, usage of how you use your hand, udatam pradeshinim vidyat prachayam madhyatonggulim nihatam tu kanishtikyam swaritopa kanishtikam. Okay, the index finger should be known as the udata. The middle finger is the prachaya. The little finger is the nihata, and the ring finger is the swarita. So depending upon what you're using, it's indicating what you should use as the finger. Okay, here again the one on top 43, it's describing how you should use your fingers. The top of the thumb when held at the root of the index finger indicates the udata tone. Middle of the ring finger is swarita, and the little finger when it is done, it represents the anudata. Okay, we'll close in the next one. Last one I wanted to cover was pataka dosha. Okay, so in Pānini Shikshā, you have an explanation of Giti Shigri Shirakampi Tatha Likhita Patakah Anarthajnolpa Kanthascha Shadete Patakadhamaha. So essentially what it's saying is, those who sing in the sing-song manner too quickly with a nodding head, or use a written text at the time of recitation. See, all of us do that, right? Today we are looking at something and then reading. All those are considered wrong according to Shikshā. You should have everything memorized correctly. And these are the 6 kinds of bad reciters. So these are Pataka doshaha. What are the Pataka gunaha? So you have Madhuryam, Akshara Vyaktihi, Padachedastu Suswaraha, Dhairyam, Laya Samartham, Cha Shadete Pataka gunaha. So there are 6 aspects: sweetness, clearness, separation of words, right ucharana, patience, accent, ability to observe. These are the 6 merits in a reciter. Okay, so we'll close with this. Thank you for your patience. But finally, it also talks about bad acharyas. Okay, so in the 50th verse of Pānini Shikshā, it says, in the repetition of that which comes from a bad acharya, that which is indistinct, basically the acharya itself is saying it incorrectly, mispronounced, or from a faulty text, there is no deliverance from its demerit as from the snake-like sin. Okay, so you're it's like basically quite negative in having a bad acharya teaching it incorrectly. With that, I don't want to fearmonger. Obviously, you should learn Sanskritam. Everyone should learn Sanskritam. This is specific to ensuring that people don't take the Vedic mantras lightly. So it's meant for Vedic mantras. You can definitely say all the other Sanskrit. You can misread Raghuvamsha by Kalidasa. That's normal human work. But the Vedic works, there is a lot of these kind of instructions to ensure that people followed it correctly, and I think it worked, because even now today you have people who are able to chant it perfectly well. So with that, we close. Thank you for your patience. Let's close with the Shanti mantra.